The diner was a relic from another era, faded red vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a long counter lined with gleaming coffee pots. The smell of frying bacon and brewing coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of bleach from the freshly mopped floor. The lunchtime rush had brought in families, workers on break, and a few regulars who knew the waitress by name. Mrs. Jenkins, in her late 70s but still spry, weaved skillfully between tables, her apron dusted with flour and coffee stains. Each plate she carried was perfectly balanced, a testament to decades of practice. Her face was kind, lined with years of smiles and laughter, but her tired eyes revealed the weight of a lifetime of work. In a corner booth, Blake, a teenager who had never known want or consequence, sprawled in an exaggerated display of entitlement. His designer sneakers rested on the edge of the seat, his phone flashing with notifications that seemed far more important to him than the real world around him. He scrolled through social media with a bored expression, barely acknowledging the other patrons. When Mrs. Jenkins approached to place his food, a burger with extra fries, Blake didn't even glance at her. He smirked, leaned back, and with a cruel flick of his tongue, spat deliberately near her feet. A few fries tumbled from the plate as she jumped slightly in shock. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice trembling but trying to stay composed. The diner seemed to freeze. Conversations halted mid-sentence, silverware clinked softly onto plates, and a hush spread across the room. Patrons stared, some with disgust, others with disbelief. Blake laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that echoed off the walls, completely unaware of the storm he had just provoked. Near the window, a table of bikers, recognizable by their worn leather jackets and tattoos, watched quietly. Their leader, Hank, squinted, his jaw tightening as he observed the disrespect. The team's arrogance was palpable, and it ignited a slow-burning anger among the bikers. They had seen rudeness before, but there was something about Blake's careless cruelty that demanded attention. Mrs. Jenkins straightened, swallowing her embarrassment, trying to ignore the growing tension. Blake continued to laugh, blissfully ignorant that the diners weren't just witnesses, they were silent jurors, and some were already deciding that justice in their own hands was coming. The leather-clad group at the window had been sipping coffee quietly, their presence noticeable but unassuming, until Blake's crude action shattered the fragile calm. Hank, the leader, a broad man with a grizzled beard and weathered hands, slammed his fist onto the table. The sound reverberated through the diner like a warning drumbeat. Cups rattled, and a few patrons jumped involuntarily. "Did he just spit on her?" muttered one biker, a tall man with a sleeve tattoo of a roaring eagle. His voice was calm, but the edge of anger was unmistakable. Another biker, younger and wiry, leaned back in his chair, clenching his jaw. "That's it," he muttered under his breath. Without a word, the bikers began to rise. Each movement was deliberate, their boots thudding against the linoleum, leather jackets creaking, chains jingling softly. Their combined presence seemed to suck the air out of the room. Patrons instinctively stepped back, creating a cautious buffer around them. The diner, once filled with casual lunchtime chatter, fell into a tense, almost cinematic silence. Mrs. Jenkins, hands trembling slightly, tried to apologize. I'm so sorry, sir," she said softly to Blake, but he waved her off dismissively, still chuckling at his own arrogance. The laughter died quickly when the bikers closed the distance between him and the corner booth. Their eyes were locked on him, unwavering, full of unspoken warning. Hank leaned slightly forward, his shadow falling across Blake's table like a dark cloud. "Kid," he said, low and controlled, "you think you're funny. You think disrespecting an elderly woman in front of witnesses is clever." His voice carried weight, the kind that made people listen without a second thought. Blake's laughter faltered, replaced by a sudden, creeping unease. The realization hit him that these weren't just random patrons, they were men who commanded respect, whose reputations were carved from years of earning fear and loyalty in equal measure. He glanced around, noticing the diner's patrons staring in wide-eyed silence, some even gripping their coffee mugs as if bracing for an explosion. The tension was palpable, every second stretched, the air thick with anticipation. Mrs. Jenkins stepped back slightly, relieved that she had allies nearby, though the fear in her eyes mirrored the collective unease of the room. Blake fidgeted, finally aware that the tables had turned, and that the consequence for his thoughtless cruelty was about to arrive. Hank stepped closer, his heavy boots echoing against the diner's tile floor. The other bikers fanned out behind him, creating an invisible wall of leather, muscle, and intimidation. Blake finally looked up from his phone, his smug grin fading, replaced by a flicker of panic. His eyes darted between the towering figures and Mrs. Jenkins, who had instinctively moved behind him, her hands trembling but clasped together tightly as if bracing for the inevitable. "You've got a lot to learn about respect, kid," Hank said, his voice low, calm, but carrying the kind of weight that made every word feel like a warning. He leaned just enough to make Blake feel the shadow of authority pressing down on him. Blake swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. The laughter that had filled the diner minutes ago was gone, replaced by the suffocating silence of everyone watching. Blake opened his mouth to speak, to make some clever joke or throw another insult, but the words froze. His bravado evaporated under the intense, unwavering gaze of the bikers. The leader's eyes, sharp and calculating, didn't just see him. They measured him, weighing his arrogance against the consequences of his actions. One of the younger bikers, arms crossed and jaw tight, leaned slightly forward. "You don't get to treat people like that," he said flatly, the undercurrent of anger in his voice unmistakable. "Especially someone who's been working her whole life, serving people, and still moving with more grace than you ever will." Blake's hands fumbled in his lap. His phone slipped from his grasp, clattering against the floor. He bent to pick it up, but Hank's hand rested on the table, steady, making it clear that he could have stopped him if he wanted. Every patron in the diner held their breath, sensing that Blake's life had been temporarily paused by the sheer presence of these men. Mrs. Jenkins, trembling but now visibly relieved, whispered, "It's okay, just listen to them." Her words barely reached him, but Blake's panic was growing. He realized, in a humbling instant, that his wealth and social status didn't shield him from the consequences of cruelty. The bikers weren't here to attack him, they were here to teach a lesson, one he would never forget. Blake's pride crumbled. He stammered an apology, voice shaking, eyes wide. The bikers, satisfied that their silent intimidation had worked, relaxed slightly but remained a looming presence, ensuring he fully understood the weight of his actions. The diner had returned to a tense equilibrium, but Blake's perspective on arrogance, entitlement, and respect had been irrevocably altered. Blake slumped back into the corner booth, his shoulders sagging under the invisible weight of shame. The adrenaline that had kept him cocky moments ago had drained completely, leaving him pale, fumbling, and disoriented. He stared down at the linoleum floor, noticing for the first time the scattered fries, the sticky mess of his disrespect, and the quiet dignity of Mrs. Jenkins, who was now standing a few feet away, her hands wringing nervously. Hank and the bikers had relaxed slightly, but their presence still dominated the diner. They didn't smile or mock him, they didn't even lecture further. Their silence was deliberate, heavy with authority. It was a lesson in restraint and consequence, one that Blake felt in every fiber of his being. Finally, with a shaky voice, Blake muttered, I'm sorry. I didn't mean, I know I shouldn't have." His words stumbled out, incomplete, desperate. He avoided looking directly at the bikers, knowing their eyes could see straight through any attempt at excuse or arrogance. Hank nodded slowly, not with anger, but with a sense of finality. "Good," he said gruffly. "Now you know. Learn from it." He gestured to the younger biker, who handed Blake his phone from where it had fallen on the floor. "Keep it," Hank added. "But remember this feeling. Don't ever forget it." Mrs. Jenkins exhaled softly, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to the bikers but to the quiet sense of justice that had been restored in the diner. Patrons around them slowly began returning to their meals, murmuring quietly among themselves, but the tension had permanently shifted. Blake's eyes, once filled with arrogance, now reflected genuine humility. For the first time, he felt the sting of consequence, the taste of accountability. Wealth, privilege, and social media followers had meant nothing in the face of respect, human decency, and the unwavering authority of those who upheld it. As the bikers prepared to leave, their boots echoing against the tile floor, Blake remained seated, silent, reflecting. The diner resumed its normal rhythm, but Blake's world had irrevocably shifted. He realized that being wealthy didn't grant immunity from lessons about decency, and that some lessons, learned the hard way, would stay with him for a lifetime. By the time the bikers' rumbling motorcycles faded into the distance, Blake's arrogance had been replaced with something entirely unfamiliar: respect, fear, and the sharp awareness that actions always carry consequences, no matter who you are.